Hey, did the Twins just save the postseason?
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who has been a baseball podcaster for, well over a decade now, and we are now in the postseason for the fifth time as a member of the Locked On Podcast Network. This episode is brought to you in part by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, they're guaranteed. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or on Instagram. I am your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. As you can see, I'm back here in the Locked On MLB studios after I dealt with some computer issues that made me say, hey, I better record this in my classroom because at least then I get an episode out. I'm going to talk a little bit about something in my classroom and how that tied into this weekend in baseball. But first, hey, look, at Astro fans, you don't want to hear this. There are 29 fan bases that dislike you. And I'm going to get grief for that, even though I can prove that in a court of law. I don't particularly dislike the Astros. I rooted for them in the last couple of World Series, and part of me would like to, there's a scenario where they get to the World Series in the third straight year, and Dusty Baker has back-to-back World Series titles as a manager, and there's something about that. If that scenario happens, it wouldn't be the saddest thing in the world for me. But there's a lot of people who are foaming at the mouth mad at the Astros will be for a generation, and you're all going to have to deal with it. And you also have to deal with something that appears, at least on the surface, to be complete and abject hypocrisy, in that there were many, many people. My Twitter was exploding. People hate the Astros with a passion, and they were loving the fact that the Minnesota Twins beat the Astros today. And Astro fans could say, wait a minute, they were rooting for Carlos Correa. And Carlos Correa was one of the heroes of the 2017 team. And they're rooting for him to beat the Astros. The answer is yes. Yes. And you've had years to figure this out, that none of this makes sense. If you're trying to find things logically, you know what? You're going to be lost in a sea of, but what are you talking about? You cannot scream at the tides. A lot of things are irrational. Okay? I'm going to get into one of the reasons why the anger for what happened in 2017 will never go away in Los Angeles County. However, yes, Carlos Correa was a member of the Astros, but he no longer wears an Astros uniform. Ergo, he is no longer part of the Astros. He was part of the team that cheated, and a lot of the players on the team now are not members of that team. That doesn't matter. People are still thrilled because most people from fan bases outside of the greater Houston area don't like you guys. Now, I'll tell you one reason I was over the moon thrilled that the Minnesota Twins and Pablo Lopez came up big time, and did I mention big time, in Game 2 against the World Series champs. I'll tell you exactly why. Because, look, I obviously love baseball. Baseball is my favorite sport. It's one of the lifeblood of my year. But this postseason was shaping up to be a flop that we haven't seen since that recent Flash movie. Why? Because it looked like we were going to see nothing but sweeps. We were going to have tons of days off. There was going to be no momentum in this series. And the fact that probably only one favored team was going to make it to the League Championship Series, therefore negating what we just saw in the regular season. And so far, so bad with the wild card series, because we have played We played 4 last year. We played 4 this year, right? I'm doing my math correct. Yes. And we've seen 7 out of 8 be busts. 7 out of 8 were sweeps. And with all these built-in days off, Monday and Friday were built-in days off. Thursday was a day off. And I was doing the math in my head that if all of the division series were sweeps, we would not have a game, no baseball on Thursday, Friday, or Saturday coming up. That's a disaster. That is no momentum for a sport that thrives on you got another game tomorrow, you got another game tomorrow. It's craziness that there's this many games, days off built into it. And I found myself, like, we'll talk about Rangers Orioles in a little bit. I found myself thinking, I'm just going to root in every series for whomever lost game one, if for no other reason than to see these series start to go the distance. Now, we saw that every team that was favored had the home field advantage in the division series looked rusty, even the Astros in game one, when they let up all those home runs after removing Verlander. Why was Verlander removed again? And 3 of the 4 home teams lost. And so we're going to have sweeps, but also not just sweeps, but the kind of sweeps that say, well, why don't we just sit through that 162 games? The Astros held on and won game one. But game two, it was the Twins who came out fighting, came out ablazing. And you saw that, as I mentioned before, Correa, who was a wrecking crew, an absolute wrecking crew, got the double in the first inning to put the Astros back 1-0 before they even came to bat. Farmer hit the home run in the second, and you could tell after the Farmer home run, this game was going to be different. The momentum that the Twins were building in the late innings and couldn't quite 100% cash in on was still there. And the amazing thing is Pablo Lopez. They mentioned that on the broadcast that it was, and I've been, anyone with eyes could see that this was a case where the trade helped both teams. Arise was exactly the type of hitter that the Marlins needed in the middle of their lineup. But Pablo Lopez was the arm that the Twins needed. And if you look up and down that lineup, the Twins have like 9, 10, maybe 11 players in double-digit home runs. They've got lots of bats. They have lots of pop. But Lopez pitched like an ace today against a team which, mind you, is pretty good and can hit. And he threw 7 shutout innings. And Alvarez, who's on a rampage so far, hit a home run, late to make it 6-2. But with that victory, we know we've got at least a game 4 somewhere. We know that these aren't all going to stall out, be sweeps. And, I want them all to go to the 5th game. Every one of them. Because I don't really have a dog in it. I don't have any real animosity towards the Braves. In fact, I like Ronald Acuna a lot. And he was not on the roster when the Braves won the 2021 World Series because he was hurt. I like the Phillies, and I like the fact that Bryce Harper is picking things up and showing how great he is. I like the Orioles. I'll get to them in a little bit. Obviously, Bruce Bochy is someone who has a strong place in my heart. I just mentioned the fact that my hatred for the Astros is non-existent. And, of course, the Twins are a great story. And the Dodgers were right down the street from me. And I often collaborate with Miller Thomas, and that means good stuff with the Diamondbacks. Miller is going to be on tomorrow's show where we'll be talking about the Dodgers-Diamondback series, which will be at Game 2 at that point. So I don't really have a team that I love or hate. And so with that in mind, I want all these series to go Game 5. And the League Championship Series to go Game 7. And the World Series to go Game 7. Do you know why? Because that'll be fun. And having these sweeps happen would be a disaster. So look at Minnesota. Thank you. Thank you for showing up. You betcha. Oh, yeah. Way to go. My knowledge of Minnesota comes from the movie Fargo, which Fargo is a city in North Dakota. Go figure. Hey, by the way, it's been a while since I've done a trivia question because I've been doing a lot of the preview stuff and everything. And I had brought up the question of which Yankee pitcher clinched a World Series title, and the next year was the GOAT of a major game between the Red Sox and the Yankees. And Sam from RIP MLB had it correct. And that was Mike Torres. Mike Torres threw a complete game victory, in fact, threw two complete game victories in the 1977 World Series as a member of the New York Yankees, signed with the Red Sox as a free agent, and led up the Bucky Dent home run. And there were many Red Sox fans I know who felt that he was a double agent because a lot of people I know are absolutely out of their tree. But we're going to talk a little bit about the other series that continued today between Baltimore and Texas. And there's a little bit of I told you so going on. But first, I'm not going to lie to you. One of the reasons why I'm pulling for the Dodgers is I want to go to a playoff game. And I can't go to the game tomorrow, but I have some time opening up. And by the time they're in the league championship series, I can go. Now, the Dodgers have to win. The Dodgers got to get into the league championship series. But if they get there, I'm getting me a ticket. And the ticket I'm going to get is going to be through Gametime, because you shouldn't have to worry about buying tickets for your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, and comedy and theater events near you, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from their seat, and the best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Now, some of the great things about Gametime: easy to find, last-minute tickets, zone deals. You could buy the tickets for any kind of event. You get views from the seats at your venue, and the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation, and job loss protection, etc. Now look at the all-in prices show up total up front, so you know what you're getting. A great deal without those hidden fees, and you can see the view from your seat, so you know exactly what you're getting into when you arrive. Well, there are no bad seats at Dodger Stadium. You can buy tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. So take the guesswork out of buying ticket with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, the lowest prices. Do you know what they are? They are guaranteed. Now look at the Texas Rangers. Looked like they fell out of the playoffs at one point in the middle of September. They looked dead from the neck up. Then came the sweep of Seattle, and they looked like they were going to clinch the division. And then they fell apart down the stretch against Seattle, and next thing you know, they were saddled with facing the Tampa Bay Rays. The Rays, in front of friends and family, folded like a tent, and we were wondering, I know I was wondering, were the Rays flat or were the Rangers just good? So they faced a tremendous test, which was the 100 some odd win Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles were licking their chops at the fact they didn't have to face the Rays, and the fact that they're going to be facing a Ranger bullpen that had blown more leads than they saved. And it looked like it was business as usual with game one. When Aroldis Chapman, someone has to explain to me why you would still put that guy in at a big moment. Loaded up the bases, looked like he was going to blow a 3-2 Ranger lead. When Young, the third baseman of the Rangers, made a great play, started a killer double play. And boy, oh boy, do I hope Aroldis Chapman bought his teammates a steak dinner after getting his butt out of there. But here's an interesting thing. The Rangers and the Orioles locked antlers. And in game one, which was a very good game, it was a 3-2 Rangers loss. Bradish didn't pitch particularly well. Starting pitcher for the Orioles. He pitched 4 2/3 innings. Well, he struck out 9. He did let up 7 hits and a run and was taken out in the 5th inning. And then came today. The Rangers came right out of the gate. Well, actually, they loaded the bases in the 1st inning and couldn't score. And then Aaron Hicks, remember him? He got a 2-run single, and next thing you know, the Orioles were in front, looking pretty good until the 2nd inning. And then you saw a 5-run barrage by the Texas Rangers. And then Garver hit a grand slam in the 3rd inning. Next thing you know, it was 9-2. And while the Orioles did pile a bunch of runs on, it was apparent that the Orioles were getting thumped. And once again, they didn't get anything from their starting pitching. Although Bradish looked like Jim Palmer compared to what Grayson Rodriguez gave him, which was less than 2. He was taken out in the 2nd inning during that bombardment. And the bullpen didn't do much better. The final score was 11-8, and it never seemed that close. And the Orioles, the 100-some-odd win Orioles, are now 1 loss away from being eliminated. And mind you, there were 3 American League East teams in the postseason. The Rays are 0-2, out. The Blue Jays 0-2, out. The Orioles are right now 0-2, on the verge of being out. The AL East teams have played 6 postseason games so far this year and have lost all of them. And now the Orioles are on the verge of being a 100-win team that not only loses the division series, but is on the verge of being swept. They're going back to Texas. Now, there have been, 10-some-odd teams that have fallen behind 2-0 and come back to win a best-of-5 series. It's happened before. The Red Sox did it in 99 and in 2003. It's happened before. However, it's rare. It happened against the A's twice in 2001 and 2003. Oh, it stinks to be an A's fan. But one of the things that I believe has killed them in these 2 games is the fact that they have not had reliable starting pitching. And we have to turn back the clock to the trade deadline when Lindsay Crosby of Locked on MLB Prospects and I talked about the Orioles at the trade deadline. And we both felt they did a horrible job, that they had a glaring need in their pitching staff. And they have tons of prospects. And there were good pitchers being traded. Now, maybe bringing up Jordan Montgomery today may not be the best thing in the world because Montgomery didn't pitch particularly well either. But he was exceptional pitching against the Tampa Bay Rays and got a little bit of, he was almost got through the 5th. I don't blame Montgomery. Montgomery is 1-1 basically in terms of good starts this postseason, which is more than the Orioles can say for either of their starters. Now, I'm going to play you a little bit of what we said back in August 2nd when the trade deadline, easy for you to say, came and went, and the Orioles didn't do their job, didn't improve their pitching staff. Just playing this right now, just so you know, this isn't second guessing on our part. We said this back in August. We were right then, and Lindsay Crosby of Locked on MLB Prospects and I were right now.
The Baltimore Orioles and Mark Elias specifically, the general manager, committed baseball malpractice at the trade deadline because think about the scenario that you're in. The Baltimore Orioles, as we go into August 2nd, are in first place in the division. They have the best record in the American League. Now, they're doing this with a rotation that I believe the scientific term is hot garbage. This is not a good rotation. Like, look at who, they're rolling out Kyle Gibson, Kyle Bradish, Dean Kramer are their 1 through 3. They called Grayson Rodriguez back up. And so at the trade deadline, you have the number 1 farm system in baseball. You have a clear and obvious need because you have all of these pitchers who are already at or past their career inning highs in the end of July. And what do? You hug your prospects. You go out and you trade for Jack Flaherty and no one else.
Yeah.
Some of the pitchers moved in the last week include Lance Lynn, Lucas Giolito, Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, Aaron Savali, Jordan Montgomery. I mean, 6 starters right there. And they go and they get Jack Flaherty. And that's it.
And the day before the Verlander trade, I said the obvious landing spot for Verlander is Baltimore. I said you can look at it. I think that was even the thumbnail of my show, was that they have the prospects, they have the need, and Verlander taking the pressure off. We need an ace on this team takes a huge amount of pressure off everyone else, kind of like it did in, let me see, what's the year I'm looking for? 2017 with the Houston Astros, who did have a much deeper starting pitching staff than this Baltimore team, but I think my point stands, and I yield my time.
Yeah, and I made this video, put this out, on YouTube. It's the podcast, and I got a lot of Orioles fans that kind of, I don't want to say came at me. Most of them were pretty polite, but their perspective of it was they were fine that the Orioles didn't go out and get a pitcher besides Jack Flaherty, when really you arguably needed 2 starters plus some bullpen reinforcements. And their arguments, Baltimore's going to be in this position a lot going forward, and so we can't.
They're psychics. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right.
We can't tear down the farm system. We can't have a fire sale of the farm system to improve the team this year because you're ahead of schedule and they're going to be doing this many, many times.
Do you know what team thought they were going to be there for a long time? They got the team together a long, long time. Are the Chicago White Sox. The White Sox, as recently, going to go all the way back to 2021, when they won the division. They made the playoffs for the 2nd straight year. They had a core of players. They're going to be in the playoffs every single year in a weak division. What did they do the other day? They sold everything except the statue of Harold Baines. So you don't know how long your window of opportunity is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know. So, Orioles fans, if you're mad at me for saying that then, if you're mad at me for bringing it up now, go ahead. But I'm right. I'm looking at my at the YouTube page. I had a really nice question from one of my listeners here, which is the great was it Robert DeMarco, who's a huge Yankee fan and the most optimistic Yankee fan. And I believe that he's an everyday Sully listener. In fact, if you listen to the show every day, please hashtag everyday Sully so I know who's listening to me every day. But he wrote me and he asked me, because I did several of my episodes from my classroom. He said, what kind of teacher are you? If I had to guess, I'd say tech or math. Well, Robert, you could not be more wrong. If I was teaching kids tech or math, then we as a society have really collapsed. No, I'm a special education teacher. I teach kids, which when I received my credential, it was called moderate to severe. I think now it's called extensive needs. These are kids. Most of my kids are on the autism spectrum. Some of them are nonverbal. Some of them are children in foster care. Some of them have trouble controlling their bodies. They're in my classroom, and we try to teach functional learning, and make sure they have the high school experience that you and I and everyone deserves, and requires a little bit of modifications on my part, but it's a lot of fun. Now, I'm going to bring up something. I'm going to connect it back from my classroom back to the playoffs here. I have a wonderful kid in my class, and I'm just going to call him D, because I don't like to say my kids' names on the air here. D is a rabid Dodger fan, and he is on the severe end of the autism spectrum, and he is a huge baseball fan. And you can imagine that has meant a nice connection between D and Mr. Sullivan, as I am called in the classroom. And he comes in every day and he'll be like, Mr. Sullivan, Dodgers won last night. Dodgers won last night. And he'll say, oh, yeah, there was Mookie Betts homer. Like, and he would tell me the events because he watches every game. But sometimes during lunch, if there's a day game being played, I'm using my projector and I'll project whatever game is being played on my screen, even if it's like like we had like the Royals playing the Twins or a game that I didn't really care about, but we'll just have it playing during lunch. And he's kind of, I wish I could record him because he gives a very sweet running commentary on the game. Now, he's a huge Dodger fan, and on Friday I started pretending that he was going to pitch for the Dodgers. I said, hey, everybody, I almost said his name. Everyone, let's give D a round of applause. He's going to pitch for the Dodgers. He says, no, I'm not. But he starts giggling because he knows that I'm having fun. I said, good luck pitching this weekend with the Dodgers. And when he left, I gave him a little high five, and I made a mock-up of a jersey that had his last name on it. I said, yep, you're going to be pitching this weekend for the Dodgers. Here's the deal. If the Dodgers brought in my student to pitch, he would have recorded only one fewer out than Clayton Kershaw. That's not hyperbole. I don't think my student would have recorded an out. Clayton Kershaw recorded one. And there is a scenario that someone could have taken a swing at one of D's pitches and they could have popped it up. Someone could have made a great catch. I don't know. But there is no way that my student could have pitched worse than Clayton Kershaw. And I have long been, Kershaw is one of my favorite players. I have long been one of his defenders. And I do think one of the reasons why there is so much anger still in LA about what happened in 2017, despite the fact they won in the COVID year, was that 2017 was going to be the year of Clayton Kershaw's great redemption. Kind of like when John Elway kept losing Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl. And when he finally won, there was this great relief that, like, okay, there's no more stigma with him. And Kershaw was brilliant against the Astros in the first game. And coming out of the bullpen in game 7, he was brilliant again and was pitching really well in that game 4, where we found out bangity bang 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 was happening. So there was sense of arguably the greatest Los Angeles Dodger of all time, arguably, was denied his John Elway moment. But here's the deal. And again, he is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's one of my favorite players in baseball. And yet you look at his stats, and he's played in like 20 some odd postseason series. And in 10 of them, he finished with ERAs over 5. It's really bizarre because if you look at his stat line in the regular season, it's exquisite. He's a Hall of Famer. And if you look at his postseason, which he's now up to 30 some odd starts, so it's like another season. He's a 500 record, but I don't care about records because that's misleading. But his ERA is mediocre. He's let up many more hits. And the fact that he's had a few brilliant series shows you that he's also had some series that are grotesque. And I'm really struggling to remember a pitcher that great being that horrible in a postseason start. I've seen Maddox get bombed in a postseason start. I've seen Pedro Martinez get bombed in a postseason start. I've seen Tommy Glavine get bombed in a postseason start. I've seen some great pitchers get their butts handed to them in a postseason start before, but never one run or one out, 1/3 of an inning. I felt badly for the notorious Dodger fans who show up late. And again, I live here in Los Angeles County. I know it's hard to get, traffic gets built up on the 5 and the 110. So even if you leave with plenty of time, it takes a while to get to your seat. Imagine sitting down. You paid the money for a postseason ticket. You've used Gametime, and then you look up and say, "We're down 5 runs, 6 runs. We haven't had an at bat yet." So look at the nice thing is that the Dodgers know. I mean, that was supposed to be their game that they had circled. Okay, we're going to win that game because Kershaw has been wonderful against Arizona, and Merrill Kelly has been, not very good at Dodger Stadium, and the Dodgers knew that their rest of their pitching staff was a bit of a question mark. Now they have Miller going against Zach Gallen. Zach Gallen has pitched really well recently. He's a Cy Young contender. They could be going down 2-0. And that scenario is real. So we're going to see what Miller, who's shown flashes of brilliance, can save this season right now. And it's also time for the Braves to wake up too. I think the off day is oddly going to help the Braves because they got a very good performance from Strider. It's just their bats were dead. They're going up against Wheeler. Wheeler's a wonderful pitcher, and Wheeler pitched really well against the Fish. Max Fried hasn't pitched a full season. It was as hurt for a big chunk of the year. I do think the Braves are going to wake up because if they don't, then are we going to see a Diamondbacks Phillies League Championship Series? I mean, I predicted both the Braves and the Dodgers were going to sweep their respective series. Oh, they could be sweeps, just not the way I was thinking. Let's do a trivia question here, though. I praised the Minnesota Twins. And the Twins franchise, when you take them back to when they were the Washington Senators, have won 3 World Series in their history. One with the 24 Senators, and with the 87 Twins and the 1999 Twins. All 3 of those World Series championships were won in Game 7. So that franchise, the Senators Twins franchise, all of their World Series titles were won in Game 7. Well, there's another franchise that takes that 2 better. One franchise has won the World Series 5 times in their history, and in all 5 times, it went to Game 7. What franchise am I talking about? What franchise has 5 World Series titles, and all of them were Game 7 wins? That's our trivia question for tomorrow. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. I am your pal Sully at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Hoping that these playoffs can not have sweeps, and thanking the Minnesota Twins for showing up. This has been Locked On MLB for the 9th day of October 2023. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Good job pitching, D, and you can call me Sully. But not you, D. You have to call me Mr. Sullivan. I'm your teacher. Don't forget that.